นอนยังไง
Good evening, Secretary Albright, Secretary Powell, members of Congress, Dr. Billington, Ms. Compton, distinguished guests, and aloha to the students and faculty of the University of Hawaii watching by a live stream at locations around the university campus. I am Jane McAuliffe, the director of the John W. Kennedy Center, and on behalf of the Library of Congress, it is my pleasure to welcome you this evening as we embark on a wonderful 5-year collaboration with the Daniel K. Inouye Institute, a collaboration in which we will commemorate the life, legacy, and values of the late Senator Daniel Inouye. This is the moment when I'll ask you to silence any electronic devices, and we'll remind you that this event is being filmed for placement on the library's website. I'd like to begin this evening by taking this opportunity to recognize the Librarian of Congress, Dr. James Billington. As you are no doubt aware, last month Dr. Billington announced that he will retire from the position of librarian effective January 1st, 2016. He was sworn in as the 13th Librarian of Congress on September 14th, 1987. By that time, he was already an esteemed professor, historian, and author, a Rhodes Scholar, a U.S. Army veteran, and the director of the Woodrow Wilson Center. Under his extraordinary leadership, the Library of Congress has preserved America's founding documents and rich national patrimony, while simultaneously building its global collections to represent diverse nations and cultures in 470 languages. He has initiated intellectual and educational programming that has touched millions worldwide and expanded the library's global reach through innovative delivery of collections, research, and information via the World Wide Web. Dr. Billington has been a visionary, a leader, and a champion for the values embodied in this venerable institution, namely the values of deeply reasoned, evidence-based research, the necessity for dispassionate perspectives to address global challenges, and an enduring appreciation for the diversity of cultures, languages, and heritages around the world. Thank you, Dr. Billington, for leadership in making this event and countless similar events possible for nearly 30 years. One of Dr. Billington's signature accomplishments was the creation of the Kluge Center, funded through the generosity of the renowned philanthropist John W. Kluge. The Kluge Center is this year celebrating its 15th anniversary. It is a residential research center in the Library of Congress where we support, showcase, and celebrate scholarship. We host over 100 senior and junior scholars every year. We mount dozens of public lectures, conferences, symposia, and other programs. And every few years we award the Kluge Prize, which recognizes lifetime achievement in the study of humanity, and which this year will be awarded in the amount of $1.5 million. This evening we are inaugurating the Daniel K. Inouye Lecture Series. Daniel Inouye was a preeminent figure in Washington and in his home state of Hawaii. He was born on September 7th, 1924 in Honolulu. Finished high school within 6 months after the U.S. entered into the war against Japan. Inouye postponed university completion to become the youngest member of the famous 442nd Regiment of the U.S. Army, a unit of Japanese-American soldiers who fought gallantly in the European theater operations. On April 21st, 1945, he was severely wounded in battle and lost his right arm. In 1947, he returned home with a Distinguished Service Cross, a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, and 12 other medals and citations. Inouye then completed his undergraduate education at the University of Hawaii and went on to law school at George Washington. In 1953, he was elected to the Territorial House of Representatives, and when Hawaii became the nation's 50th state, Inouye became Hawaii's first representative to the U.S. House. In 1962, he was elected to the U.S. Senate as America's first Japanese-American senator. Nearly a half-century in Washington, Senator Inouye served as a member of the Senate Watergate Committee, chairman of the Senate Iran-Contra Committee, and as a long-time member of the Senate Appropriations Committee, which he chaired from 2009 to 2012. Senator Inouye died on December 17, 2012. He was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his military service and was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the first senator to receive awards. Tonight, the John W. Kluge Center at the Library of Congress and the Daniel K. Inouye Institute launch a 5-year distinguished lecture series to commemorate Daniel Inouye's commitment to bipartisanship, moral courage, public service, and civic engagement. For each of the next 5 years, an annual program in this series will focus on a theme that reflects these principles. Tonight, we address bipartisanship and the U.S. engagement with the world around us, exploring how leaders have cast aside political differences at home in order to act in the nation's best interest abroad, and how they might do so in the future. This event is made possible by a generous donation from the Daniel K. Inouye Institute. We're privileged this evening to have the Senator's widow and the driving force behind his legacy, Mrs. Irene Inouye, in attendance. I would also like to acknowledge the Senator's son, Kenneth. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the distinguished panelists who tonight will address shared values in U.S. foreign policy. Former U.S. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright served in that position from 1997 to 2001, the first woman to hold the position in United States history. She was born in Prague, Czechoslovakia, and immigrated to the United States with her family in 1948. Secretary Albright became a U.S. citizen in 1957 and rose to prominence with a distinguished academic and political career before being appointed ambassador to the United Nations by President Clinton and then Secretary of State. She wrote her dissertation at the Library of Congress on the role of the Czechoslovak press in the Prague Spring. Former U.S. Secretary Colin Powell served in that position from 2001 to 2005, the first African American to head the Department of State. He was born in Harlem, New York, the son of Jamaican immigrants. He was a war veteran with a distinguished career as a high-profile military officer, national security advisor, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staffs. Powell was appointed Secretary of State by President George W. Bush. Andrea Mitchell was unable to be here tonight as she is on assignment in Vienna covering developments in nuclear talks between world leaders and Iran. So we are delighted to have Ann Compton with us this evening, distinguished journalist and former White House correspondent for ABC News. Thank you, Anne, so much for your willingness to participate in this event with us. At the end of the panelist conversation, we will allot a few moments for questions. Index cards and pencils will be distributed. So please write your question and hand it to one of the ushers who will bring it forward. And we will certainly do our best to address as many questions as possible in the time available. Will you now join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists to the stage?
So then, when I was named to be Secretary of State, he said to me, Ms. Madeline, we will make history together. And we actually did. And so, and it made a difference. We disagreed on many things, but I thought that it was the man with first style, and it really made a difference to be able to. And then I have to say, the last part, my best friend here is my successor. We disagreed on some things, but we mostly agree on everything, and it's an example of bipartisanship. Alma.
It's a great pleasure to be here this evening, and aloha to the students, and especially Hawaii. I thank the Senator and the Senator for putting this together and supporting us for the next 5 years. I knew Senator Dan very, very well. When he was chairman of the Defense Subcommittee and was my man for money. While I was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I used to illustrate to my staff what it was like to deal with giants in the Congress. My staff would march in and complain about some issue that, we're not getting the money we need, and the Congress will please sit, you've got to do something. We don't know what to do. We're lost. And I would say, leave the room, please. And I would pick up the phone and I would say, get this out for me. And I would say, hey, Dan, call me. We got a problem. This is a no kidding problem. We really need this money done. So, never a discussion. I didn't do that too often. I did it often enough to get what I did. And that was the kind of leader he was. We don't see enough leaders in Congress. People who I call the cardinals of the Congress. They have power and they exercise that power. They always exercise it for the good. And so I will always remember his soft, quiet, steel-like way he went about his business. And I'll never forget the fact, as a soldier, the sacrifices he made in 442nd, the Grove Regiment. In reality, the world didn't know that he was not allowed to enlist until 1943. That was after they allowed Japanese Americans to join the United States Army to fight for America. While many other generals stood against. And he took that opportunity to enter as the man who was left by 1947 Academy. So Danny was a great leader, a great senator, a great member of Congress. And I think he would be very honored to know that this was being in his honor and recognition of his service to the country. Speaking of service to the country, I also had to say a word about Jim Billington. Not only does he understand this library in Congress, but I really think Reagan did something. National Security Advisor to President Reagan in the last 2 years of the Reagan administration. We're going through that period of understanding the new Soviet Union when Gorbachev was telling us all that blasphemous as president. And we were listening very carefully. Could we trust this guy? And Billington was called in constantly by President Reagan for his advice. It was hard as a soldier to listen to Gorbachev say all these things about striking. And I actually went to Moscow once and lectured me about you don't understand changing things. If you're a soldier, you've never considered the kinds of things that I might be able to do. And so you've got to move that soldier's mindset and listen carefully. And he was getting more and more annoyed with me, and I was getting more and more annoyed with him. I kept thinking, I didn't come here to be lectured by this guy. I don't care what he says, he's still a commie. I mean, And so finally, President Gorbachev stops talking, and he knows he's not making the sound. He stops talking, and he looks up, and then gets the idea to back down. He looks directly across from me, and he smiles. And he just looks at me and leans forward and says, General, I'm so very, very sorry. We'll have to find a new enemy. And I thought to myself, I don't want to. I've invested 30 years in this enemy. Just because you're having a bad year, why do we have to change? That was the end of the world that had structure in it. Now that I've been talking about this repeatedly, there was structure in that world. the red side of the map, the blue side of the
VI WebEx, video telephone courtroom A, web link http bentoncountywebex.com, 14606287229, call 1408-418-938, courtroom A, B, C, D, E, F, web link 146, number room, courtroom F 1469.
Politics cannot be
146-936-6508, 48418-938.
that's what democracy is all about.
Courtroom A 146-062-8729. Courtroom B
In my experience, many years here in
146-244-0353. Courtroom C web link. Meeting room numbers 146 146-693-9090. Meeting room D, courtroom D 146-732-1545. Courtroom C, meeting room 146-693-9090. Courtroom B 14084189388. Meeting numbers 146-244-0353. Call in 148-418-938.
Is today in double overtime at negotiations with Iran on a nuclear deal, and the bitter and also sharp criticism coming here from members of Congress, from political candidates who say this deal will bring on war. That has to be, that is a creation of the current time. How do you deal with that if you're the Secretary of State sitting in that chair?
I agree with Colin about our system, and it's something that brings us vibrancy and interest, and we can talk about the role of Congress and foreign policy, Constitution, to know.
Benton County Court of Construction Notice Service Courtroom A, B, C, D, and F, and also the service for the COVID-19 policy regulations and services.
And some about the water's edge part is when members of Congress go abroad and criticize the President of the United States, and they get complicated, and then people don't know what the voice is. I do think, I would not frankly like to be in or both in negotiations. It is hard when the domestic echo is out there and it's different.
Courtroom Construction Notice A, B, C, D, and F.
I think
Andy Miller 509-735-359, fax 509-736-306.
and I think the thing that has changed is there is more discussion everywhere. But it's difficult. I can just imagine that John Kerry's face, okay, please, I've had enough of this. I've got to deal with the Iranians and not consent.
That was not nice.
You were the one who said you liked this.
I rest my case with respect. I don't know what will emerge from the negotiations at Vienna. They've been going on for many years. They started when I was Secretary of State. And it's a very difficult issue. And I think some things that may not be satisfactory. The more compromise I would not make a judgment on what they're coming up with. Until I see it, we don't know. But I would like to make this point. We are so consumed with this nuclear deal with the Iranians that we're kind of not paying attention to all the other things that they're doing that are far more serious right now in the present time. They are making inroads in Iraq. They're making inroads in Yemen. They're making inroads in Syria. They're making inroads in Beirut. They're doing a lot of rebels, even if we had a nuclear agreement with them.
His face, man. It's his face.
Welcome to a look back, but also a look forward in the search for those shared values in American foreign policy. When I first arrived, if you'll forgive me just a personal comment, first arrived to cover the White House more than 40 years ago, this nation had been torn apart by both
the Watergate scandal, which brought down a president, and by Vietnam, which was a war in its last painful days. But even then, as a young novice covering the national government, I learned that one of the first lessons was that, that the very American principle of when it comes to American engagement overseas, partisan politics should stop at the water's edge. Those were the words of a Republican Senator, Arthur Vandenberg, who was not only chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but he was president pro tem, which meant he was third in line to the succession of the presidency. And yet, as a Republican, he worked very hard with Democratic President Harry Truman in those crucible days right after World War II. Politics, as we all know, no longer stops at the water's edge. And please welcome two very strong intellects who have experienced all of this for themselves. And I'd like to invite quick opening statements, if you will, from Secretary Madeleine Albright, whom I covered as a Secretary of State in the second Clinton term, and then she handed the reins of power to Secretary Colin Powell in the George W. Bush administration. Secretary Albright.
Well, thank you, Anne, and I'm delighted to be here. And Dr. McCullough, thank you very much. This is kind of a perfect event. First of all, aloha. And then also because it combines so many different aspects in terms of Jim Billington's incredible service. I was able to be a scholar at the Wilson Center when he was there, and he clearly is somebody that had a huge effect on Russia, Soviet Union, Soviet policy. Then, as was mentioned, I did my dissertation here. And then Senator Inouye was really a remarkable senator that I had the honor to appear before and work with, and so it is great. And then with my really good friend, Colin Powell. On the issue of bipartisanship, I feel very, very strongly about it, and people may find this hard to believe, but I was very good friends with Jesse Helms when he was chairman of the committee. First of all, well, we first got together when I was ambassador at the United Nations, and he called me up because he wanted me to go and speak at a women's college in Raleigh, and he said it was the bicentennial and I should do that. And to be frank, I thought I could get out of it by saying, I will do this if you go with me. So he said, well, I'll call you back. And in half an hour he called back and he said, I'm going with you. So when somebody has invited you somewhere and they have to introduce you, they're not going to say, this is the stupidest person I ever met. So
I'm going to remember. All of you remember that.
He gave me a very nice introduction. We had a very interesting time, and I was able, because the students there asked questions about the United Nations, to answer them in exactly the way that they needed to be answered, and he heard them. So then he said, I want you to come with me to my alma mater. And we did that, and what happened was that we were driving around North Carolina looking for barbecue places, and then by the time we get there, he was partially bionic already with artificial hips, and so I'm helping him get out of the car, and I'm hanging on to him for dear life, and some cameraman took a picture, and the title was The Odd Couple. So then, when I was named to be Secretary of State, he said to me, Ms. Madeleine, we will make history together. And we actually did. And it made a difference. We disagreed on many things, but I thought that it was the Vandenberg style, and it really made a difference to be able to. And then I have to say, the last part, my best friend here is my successor. We disagree on some things, but we mostly agree on everything, and it's an example of bipartisanship. Thank you. Thank you. Alma.
It's a great pleasure to be here this evening, and aloha to the students at the University of Hawaii. I thank the Kluge Center and the Inouye Institute Center for putting this together and supporting us for the next 5 years. I knew Senator Dan very, very well when he was chairman of the Defense Subcommittee and was my man for money. While I was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I used to illustrate to my staff what it was like to deal with giants in the Congress. My staff would march in and complain about some issue that, you know, we're not getting the money we need, and the Congress won't release it, you've got to do something. We don't know what to do. We're lost. And I would say, fine, leave the room, please. And then I would pick up the phone, and I would say, get the good senator for me. And when Dan got on the phone, I would say, hey, Dan Cohen, what do you need? I said, I really got a problem, and this is a no-kidding problem. I really need this money. Done. That was it. It was over. No further discussion. I didn't do that too often, but I did it often enough to get what I needed. And that was the kind of, that's the kind of leader he was. We don't see enough of these leaders in Congress now. People who, I call them the cardinals of the Congress. They had power and they exercised that power, and they always exercised it for the good of the country. And so I will always remember his soft, quiet, steel-like mood, the way he went about his business. And I will never forget the fact that as a soldier, the sacrifices he made in the 442nd Gulf Grove Regiment. And the reality, for all of you to know, is that he was not allowed to enlist in the Army until 1943. And that was after they allowed Japanese Americans to join the United States Army to fight for America, while many other Japanese were still being interned in camps. And he took that opportunity and entered as an enlisted man and left in 1947 as a captain of the United States Army. And so Danny was a great leader, a great senator, a great member of Congress. And I think he would be very honored to know that this was being held in.
Everyday battle.
This is corporation.
You go to Steamboat Springs or all those big ski resorts, they have it there. They've had it there for years. I talked to a guy